On its way. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good.
Done.
Good afternoon. The October 18th Special Board Committee on Housing is called to order.
There's something wrong. Somebody has a phone.
Good delay.
We got to take it. We got to.
It happen every time.
Good. Okay, should be good.
We talk.
Hello.
Hello.
Test. All right. So let's start anew. Good afternoon. The October 18th Board Special Committee on Housing is now called to order. Before we get started, we need to make certain findings on the record regarding the necessity for conducting this meeting by electronic participation without a physical quorum present due to travel restrictions. In accordance with Tennessee Code annotated section 8-44-108, section B2, as chair of the Special Housing Committee, I offer the following facts and circumstances in support of a finding of necessity for the Board of Trustees Special Committee on Housing to conduct its October 18th, 2023 meeting without the physical presence of quorum. The Housing Committee is scheduled to take up important committee matters which require timely action by the committee, including, but not limited to, an update on the university's master plan, a report on a proposed housing development along the university's Cumberland property, and development opportunities at Avon Williams campus, and reports by the Housing Committee members. Participation by electronic means is necessitated by members in person absent due to unavoidable travel issues.
Deborah Cole.
I move that the committee find that participation.
If someone has music in the background, if you can mute your phone. Dr. Cole. Dr. Cole, are you able to mute your phone? We've got music playing in the background.
He said on hold music. Somebody put it on hold music.
What's going on?
Somebody put their phone on hold. Cut down there.
Not me.
Dr. Cole, can you hear us? Dr. Cole? Any other people on the phone hear us?
So Trustee
Yeah, I
McKenzie?
can hear the concert as well. You gotta just cut the mic off.
I can put everybody on.
It's not on our end, trustee.
We can hang up and just make them all dial back in.
Thanks, sir. Okay, what we're gonna have to do is, there's someone where the music is playing in the background. Can you all hang up and then call back in, so we can disconnect? And then we'd only have those calling in be on there, and then when she calls in, we can mention her about the music at the time. Okay, very good. All right, sounds good. Get to Savannah. She. Moderator information.
Yes, I know, yeah.
Start over again.
To the Broadworks Collaboration Center, please enter a conference ID and press pound. Please enter the security PIN and press pound. Please record your name after the tone and press pound. You will now be placed into the conference. Press star for help.
Toby McKenzie.
Everybody hung up but her. If everybody hung up but her, she's still connected to the call.
Yeah.
To mute, press 1. To get the list of participants, press 2. For lecture mode, press 3. For conference lock and unlock, press 4. To self-identify, press 7. To end the conference, press 8. To return to the conference, press the pound key. To repeat these options, press. You are trying to terminate the conference. To confirm, press 1.
Hello.
To return to the
I think you're on the phone. As the,
Hello.
Second music playing. Can you disconnect or something because it's coming in?
Here's another piece of other stuff.
Okay. All right. Step share though. That's for capacity disconnection at the time.
To the Broadworks Collaboration Center, please enter a conference ID. Please enter the security PIN and press pound. Please record your name after the tone and press pound. You will now be placed into the conference. Press star for help. Deborah Cole.
Trustee McKenzie, are you on?
Toby McKenzie.
Okay. And I believe we had Sean Wimberly before. Trustee Wimberly, are you on? Okay, and we have Trustee Cole as well. Okay.
Yeah, give us a break. Okay, participation by electronic means is necessitated by members' in-person absence due to unavoidable travel issues. Accordingly, I move that the committee find that participation by a quorum of the committee members by electronic means of communication is necessary. Is there a second?
Second.
The question is on the motion to find that participation by a quorum of the housing committee members by electronic means of communication is necessary. Secretary Pelton, please call the roll.
Trustee Pinnock,
Present.
Trustee McKenzie,
Present.
Motion carries. We will now proceed with the quorum present. All right, first item on the agenda is approval of the June 28th, 2023 Housing Committee meeting minutes.
Fisher.
Oh, okay, all right. Secretary Pelton, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Secretary, I'm sorry, Trustee Pinnock,
Present.
Trustee McKenzie,
Present.
that we have a quorum.
We have a quorum. All right, First item on the agenda is approval of the June 28th, 2023 Housing Committee meeting minutes. I move that those minutes be approved. Is there a second?
Second.
The questions on the motion to approve the June 23 Housing Committee meeting minutes. Secretary Tony.
Trustee Pinnick,
Aye.
trustee McKenzie.
Aye.
Just for reference, those materials were provided to you and posted to the board website.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an update report. Excuse me, before we do that, let me acknowledge, I can't acknowledge everybody around the table. But let me acknowledge trustees Bill Johnson, President Glover, and members of her cabinet. I will say Mr. Henley because I hadn't seen him here before, but there's several others here that I'd like to acknowledge. If you don't mind, just go around the table and just tell us very quickly who you are.
Curtis Johnson.
Will Radford,
Edward Henley.
Lawrence Johnson.
Greg Robinson,
Bill Johnson.
Julius Proctor.
Jeanette Brown, Office General Counsel.
Frank Stevenson, student affairs.
And with those members that are on the participants on, oh, bitch, I'm sorry.
Doug Allen, Vice President of Business and Finance.
Dr. Allen.
Yes, sir.
And with those on the phone, please identify.
Trustee Opie McKenzie.
Trustee Sean Wimbley Jr.
And trustee McKenzie, are you, trustee McKenzie, are you with anyone at this time in your meeting?
No.
All right, next on the agenda is an update on the TSU master plan. Dr. Glover or someone from her team would provide that.
Mr. Will Radford, that's very sharp.
Will Radford here. Master plan has been executed by Wolford Engineering. They continue to update the two parts associated with the master plan. Part one being the facilities condition assessments. Those assessments really set the tone for how existing buildings will be treated. And then the second portion is the sort of projection for Avon Williams campus downtown, the main campus, as well as what we're calling the river campus or the farm, and projecting how the 169 acres might be utilized in the best interest of Tennessee State University. So as those two parts progress independently, the team is meeting with Wolford in a day-long workshop today. Started this morning, will conclude this evening at 3 p.m. where the primary objectives are to work through 3 alternative plans that were presented, and then to develop what will be the final plan, which is the 4th plan. So they have looked at it from a crime prevention standpoint, connectivity to community standpoint, maintaining academic interest with low investment standpoint, and then ultimately what will be the final objective will be something that balances those 3, but then pursues what TSU has mentioned in the May review and walkthrough. A lot of what you'll see is opportunities for P3s isolated, the inclusion of the key parks that should be on the 169 acres, the repurposing of the Avon Williams campus downtown, as well as the migration plan required to make those different pieces work. By moving the police force to Humphreys Hall, what do I do as I move them there? And then how do I renovate or deal with the building they vacated before I move the dental school there? So it's not only what the future looks like, what are the phases required to coordinate and deliver that future? That was hopefully, that was originally expected to deliver in December. It is now projected to deliver February 16th. That schedule's modification is based on 1, having greater level of detail on 169 acres, and then 2, revising the facility condition assessment pricing to accommodate what's more realistic in Nashville. So there are national standards that they have used to create pricing, but when we look at the work we're doing in Nashville and how those numbers connect, they don't. And it's not something we would go forward with as a plan or budget because we would not be able to pay the national rates. So it was a period of verification and proving that took better than 2 months. We condensed the impact of it to 2 months so that we can be clear that TSU gets a plan, one that reflects what we want, but two, projects the cost in a way that we can actually use that information. Because the initial costs were not usable. It was not something that we could present to the SBC or quite frankly to the president in a way that we can stand behind.
With regard to the Queen Washington building that you just referenced, moving dental into there eventually. Are there plans, is there more details available for us regarding that? Are there plans to move all the health services into that building? Look at more than one central location or
The only piece that we weren't able to put in the health science building was the dental program. Everything else is solid where they are. Working with the dental chair, he shared with us his need, his projected need, their projected need. And so that's incorporated into the vision that we're putting together for them.
And so the PT clinic is also located temporarily in our biomechanics lab too.
Yeah, no.
So, and you know, I want that out there. So hopefully that is on that plan also for Queen Washington
Well, Dr. Barreto has not approached us about anything.
recently. Because we did long before, so
From the onset, we it was in there, but
Yeah.
then you all
I'll
changed it.
I'll put a bug in his ear. Okay,
Yeah, you all changed it and then surprised.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So I have a couple questions. I assume that enrollment is driving what the plan is proposing. Is that right? At least in part.
In part, yes. Enrollment is in part. The desire of the president to move the institution from R2 to R1 is a part of that, as well as the new program, potential new programs and programs that have been approved by the state for the institution.
As well as necessary upgrades.
Yes,
Our facilities are not up to par with other universities.
yeah, I would add to that, as the president mentioned, that there's quite a bit that has to do with curing what we have before it's growing what we have. So a lot of the idea of enrollment driving it would be if we're adding new buildings and we're not modifying or repurposing those existing ones. But for example, the engineering building is spread out to 7 different buildings right now. When we condense that into one building and that project goes forward, those other 8 spaces will be part of the migration plan and how they will be utilized across the campus. But all of them will have to be improved to be useful to the new occupant who uses that. That is the story across campus. Most of the buildings built in the 60s and 70s have not been maintained on the APA level standard, which would allow us to readily use them and change them from tenant to tenant. That's not the case here. So a lot of what we're projecting is doing a cost benefit analysis between what if I renovate Elliott Hall versus replace it? And if I build a new building, how do I use the swing space to accommodate that while I take that offline? It's a 3-part analysis, but most of it is driven by, we have legacy buildings that are expensive to operate, that have done a good job of keeping us afloat. But if we're looking down the road, we're not planning 10, 20, 30 years around those buildings. We're 10, 20, 30 years around new structures from an efficiency and a sustainability standpoint.
But Dr. Glover, did you have some?
Actually, he was saying what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
It's okay. But can we do both? Can we think about the fact that we have to renovate or replace our existing?
And that's what we're doing.
Okay.
And so in turn, that's why we haven't taken any buildings offline. In fact, we've attempted several times to use certain older buildings for swing space, but because our needs are so great, we had to actually take those buildings and make them offices and classrooms because we don't have the space we need. And the programs with the student affairs, with the services that they're trying to provide now, need more space. And so trying to accommodate them, the academic units who are getting these grants and we're trying to accommodate the grants without any new space. So, look,
Well,
it's difficult to renovate a space with occupancy.
yeah, so I mean, so I get reconfiguring or replacing, you know, our existing buildings or whatever we're doing to them. But I'm also thinking about future growth. I'm thinking about growth. And so the both would be, are we able to think about growth and think about the condition and what we need to do to satisfy our current. So,
That's precisely what we said. We have two tiers. There's the student housing tier, then there's the academic building and the other infrastructure tier.
Yeah.
So we're working both of those. While enrollment is a function, it is not the overriding function. It's programs, it's R2 to R1, it's the repairs that are needed, it's a current status. We're looking at the whole sustainability model, the whole ecosystem will show that residential living, residential life is part of it. And then how living on campus is part of it. They have to leave the residence hall and go to their engineering building, go to the business school. They have to go to the buildings where they're going to be educated. So it takes both of those.
so if we are not, if the number of people that are coming to and through campus is not increasing, then, you know, we can do everything online. So I guess my question is, if enrollment is part of it, what part is it? And what enrollment are we thinking about?
So
I think we think-
first. We did not set a number
Okay.
on enrollment.
Okay.
We had a number in a strategic plan that was shot down to pieces. So we decided to move forward with with controlled growth until we get new residence halls first. But in the meantime, while we work in the residence halls, we have to make sure the students are learning in an environment that's conducive for learning.
Sure.
And so, like last year, we had the 3,300 students. We made a conscious decision this time to do half of that this year. So this year, you know, we have close to 1,800 freshmen. I suspect that we're gonna have that for the next couple of years until we're gonna control it like that, until we can get the housing that we need. We are controlling the growth of first year students.
Right.
We have to, we're gonna, you know, survive in this political market.
That's right.
That's where we are.
We also, with academic affairs on the academic side of it, program growth. So looking at the space they need on the academic building, based on the number of students that they're accepting into the different majors.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because academics has to help you come up with the projections.
Right.
And so,
So the engineering program has 952 students. The average square foot, 62 square feet per student. The state standard is 123
Double that.
square feet per student. So if I don't grow the program, I still need to double the size of the building to accommodate. Right, so I know when I double the size of the program, the same professors who figured out how to make half as much space meet the needs of twice as many students, will be able to do that with twice as much space. So I think new space, already very resourceful staff, they will take that and multiply beyond 952. I believe that approach helps us meet the present demand and at the same time grow. So when we looked at the engineering building, we didn't look at the 20-year mark, we looked at the 5-year mark. A lot of people thought that was myopic and short-sighted, but with the present staff we have, it was the most conservative and realistic approach to say, how do we double the square footage, which only really asked them to get up to 1128 in the student count, but I'm sure they will exceed that, even though the space would ask them for more right now. So it's a balance between the cost benefit analysis, so that the numbers tell us what to do and tells us how to build in a reasonable frame without overbuilding. And then how to support our staff enough that they can use that space to be as creative as possible.
So as we move forward towards R1, that engineering space and all the rest of our programs, which we're adding doctoral programs, require significant laboratory space. Okay, and so that and that is going to be needed, not just within the next 5 years, But as we continue to grow that to beyond our ideal of 2,500 graduate students to 5,000 graduate students or whatever we're going to need to sustain an R1 enterprise, that has to be in this calculus also, right? And so is and that has to be a look beyond 5 years in this process, right? So
It is, that's the first stop,
is that happening?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the lab space, we have 66,000 square feet. The entire engineering building now is 52,000 square feet.
Correct.
So just the lab space going forward, according to the state standards, this is not TSU wishing upon a star. It's TSU saying, what does the count say by the state standards? It tells us you need 86,000 square feet of lab space. In terms of our site constraints and the building design, we landed at 66,000 square feet, which is about 4 times what we have right now. So it's the right answer on the state standard. It equips professors and students to recruit and have 4 times more space than they have right now. And in my opinion, I think it exceeds the 5-year mark because of COVID shifted those numbers and that group in that time frame as well. But we're right now accommodating 952 with 52,000 square feet, and we'll, if the plan is approved, have 191,000 square feet.
Yeah, so I guess my point is that current faculty and current needs in engineering, for instance, that faculty headcount will increase significantly. Okay, each, unlike other academic disciplines, engineering faculty members need not just instructional classroom space, but they may each need specific laboratory space also.
And that was part of the conversation that we had with the faculty and the dean when we talked about space planning. And we've had about 3 meetings with them. And the what's the guy with design state?
Bauer Askew Design, TTU's engineering building, University of Knoxville. So we're on par with what's in the state. And there's not a sense of, well, we're not planning enough for future. We're meeting the demand.
Yeah,
and exceeding.
I just wanted to have us in the calculus here. 10 to 15 more doctoral faculty members, 10 to 15 to 25 to 30 research faculty.
That's a commercial say, it's in there.
To be housed in that. Yeah.
And that's an excellent point, because we can't move from R2 to R1 and scale it down.
Nope.
We need to scale up to meet their formula.
Yes. It's better for us to build and fill
Yeah,
than build and
not there.
not fill.
Yeah,
I think that goes back to your point, Dr. Johnson, that you had faculty involvement that understand that academic discipline, right? And I think as part of what you may be seeing in addition, so I think everyone collectively looked at how do we grow, right? And keep it in mind, Dr. Glover's vision of moving to R1.
Correct.
And we asked the dean and the associate dean to include the programs that were just recently approved. And where are they trying to go with new programs that would most likely be approved, that they're already strong in. Okay, so that was part of the planning process that we had.
Well, I'll say this, I'll move off this point. We're not planning for the students of today, we're planning for the students tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
And there's nothing in
And
my
programs.
mind that, yes, and programs of tomorrow. But there's nothing in my mind that says we can't be aspirational
Yes.
about what tomorrow looks like. So,
Because,
any,
for example, go to R2 to R1. We got some master's programs now that will have compatible PhD programs that are going to require space. Environmental science, food animal science, public health, speech and hearing, chemistry, business administration, PhD in political science, PhD in chemistry. All of those will require a new mindset when it comes to the space and the laboratory requirements for many of those programs.
Yeah.
So we're under the ones that we are kind of after. We know some of the ones you can bump up that will help you get there faster. It's not a fast process. We've got some that will be more, that there's more help than others. And so just looking at those alone, even if we look at getting a doctorate in anywhere in humanities, We said English maybe. I mean, I said, you're gonna need some more space for that.
And to that point, PhD in literature
Yes.
has a completely different facility need
Absolutely.
than a PhD in chemical engineering.
Art. Mhm.
So let me ask this question. In terms of an accessible campus, if we were to rate ourselves from 1 to 10 on accessibility, not physical,
Have you got?
access to our buildings, but accessibility of all of our equipment and technology, since we're planning.
I would put it at a 7.
Okay,
I would put it at a 7 because we,
6, 7.
pre-COVID,
okay,
we did a number of things to make campus accessible.
okay,
Shade sidewalks to try to eliminate the unevenness. We work with disability services, who is encouraged to get with the faculty to make sure we have furniture in the classrooms, that the room where we need it. Now people go in and remove them, but so we have to go and replace it. We don't know where it's disappearing, but we work real hard to try to be accommodating for our students. Now we have some challenges on the athletic side, in coming from the parking lot to Gentry Center in the back. So we've been trying to work with the state because they allocate so many dollars per year. So we've been trying to get that to enough money to resolve that issue. When I first came here, we had a Title IV issue with the OCR, which we resolved. I had to go out and measure parking spaces in a suit one day, but I think it's a 7.
So was your question an ADA issue or is it a functionality issue?
both.
Because there's two things.
Well, so it's really both, but it's not really a technology meeting.
You 88
Uh,
first.
yeah.
Yeah, functionality.
So it was more.
Because there's a
Because I know-
significant difference.
I know-
You can ask your question in 2 parts, you 88 first.
We have
Yeah,
with ADA, we do quite well. We have software, we have interpreters, we work quite well with the students. Our offices work with the agencies, various agencies in the city, to support the campus in that endeavor. So we're better in the services than we are on the campus structure. So I would put it at an 8.5 to 9 on the services.
Okay.
So working with the students on their extra time and meeting their accommodation needs. Work with the faculty to make sure that they accommodate the student and they're aware of what the student needs are. So we do quite well with that.
Any other questions? All right. Let's move on to a report on the status of current housing matters. And before whoever's gonna speaks, I'm referencing primarily our discussion from our previous housing committee meeting back in June, I think it was. And so there were some steps and some things that we were going to do as a result of the student survey, exit survey. So whoever's going to speak.
Yeah. We should speak on that one, the follow-up stuff, follow-up from last June, it was going another direction.
Well, I'm interested in what
Go ahead, James.
we yeah.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Chair Pinnick, and I want to just again introduce our new director of housing. This is her first year, and she jumped in here, Ms. Shalonda Parr, and thank you for your leadership and also he's been here for a long time, but he's now in the role of the associate director, Mr. Julius Proctor. So I appreciate their working with him. So even though I'm doing a lot of the reports, they do the digging in. And so I wanted them to also be here in case there was some other questions. So in our last meeting prior to moving in June, there were some concerns relative to the student survey that was done. And we were charged with to go back and look at that and come up with some solutions. And so what we did was we did a focus group of we said about 60 students, Ms. Parker. We did a focus group of about 60 students, all who stayed all who stayed in those, in the hotels the previous year, to dig into just a little deeper, to their answers on the survey and really try to get our arms around what really were the issues. And so we were able to drill down on, like, for instance, when the question was asked that they were concerned about their safety, and some of them put low marks on safety, but what does that look like? And so was that the security guard not doing the job? Was it doors that were propped open? Was it the community? Was it? So we were interested in digging into that. After that focus group, we were able to determine that there were some things that we should have been doing and need to do. We implemented a new safety plan. We met with the hotel staff, we met with the police department, we met with parking. All of us met to talk through what that would look like. Then we had another meeting again with the deputy chief Green, our team, Commander McLean, and obviously Chief Robinson, to talk about the collaboration with the city and our police department and security in terms of making sure that was going to be a safe space for our students. So came up with a full safety plan that we implemented, which included making sure things such as making sure students are checking in and showing their IDs, and so we know who's there, only those students who are there. Doing routine checks on the doors to make sure that those doors are not being propped open. We asked both of the hotels, and they did do this, to add alarm notification when those doors are open. If the doors stay open too long, then that alarm will go off and let the person at the front desk know that, you know, somebody's opened that door and left it open for a friend or something. And so that was a part of it. We were very intentional about the training of those particular RAs and staff members who would be at those facilities. So we had different levels of conversations with them. We also had meetings with the students very early on. We talked about the environment, the expectation, the rules of living off campus. Those meetings went very well. We followed up with some more meetings with those students to kind of see how things were going. But the implementation of the safety plan was really good, and it was good that we got that information from our students and cleaned up our processes, right? We also were very intentional about the instructions that we gave to the security that would be working there in terms of our expectations. Certainly don't want anyone to sleep or not paying attention and not doing rounds and those kind of things. So we made sure that we implemented the protocols for the security officers and armed and unarmed staff that would be working in those spaces. Again, we went over the rules and our expectations with the students very early on, why it's and why, right? Because we're living in the community together out here, and why it's important for, you not to, have one of your buddies from your hometown come and stay at the hotel with you for 3 weeks, right? Why it's not a good idea to have a snake in your room, right? And so we share with the RAs, particularly those that will be working out there, how important it was to make sure that we hold the same standards that we expect on our campus. We have the same rules, right? Some of the students feel like, when I live off campus, I'm in a hotel room. So I get to live a hotel lifestyle without, we have the same policies as it relates to visitation, as it relates to weapons, as it relates to drugs, all those policies. And so we encouraged ourselves to make sure that we're enforcing those. I met with the RAs twice out there myself. I gave them all tickets to our concert free. So you all are doing a little extra work, and I want to show you a little extra appreciation. And so I forgot, but they reminded me through Ms. Parr that those concert tickets were promised and they were waiting on them. So we did get them to. And so far we haven't really had any incidents at the hotels. We had one student who, he had his friend girl over. We had one young man, he had his friend girl over. She leaves out, I believe, takes a pair of his Jordans and puts them in the back of his car, and somebody opened the door and said, "Oh man, these shoes are the same size I wear," right? So they took them, and we hate that, but some crimes are preventable, just locking your door, right? So that's one we had to kind of have a tough conversation with him. He's like, but anyway, so no major issues. I mean, that was the only real issue we've had was his sneakers were stolen off the back seat of an unlocked door that his friend girl left unlocked. And so we've been pleasantly surprised, or pleasantly happy with the fact that we've had no incidents compared to in years past. Now, knock on wood, we have to keep at it, right? I mean, it's still, now that area, is shifting a little bit, which is helping us out. The hotel across the street is closed down. Some investors bought the other property adjacent to it. And so they tore that property down. So you still got a couple of them over there that are still bringing kind of, I guess you'd say, unwanted individuals in. But it's shifting a little bit, which is giving us a little bit of a reprieve. So we did address those things. We met with them around Wi-Fi and did an assessment in all of our off-campus areas on our Wi-Fi and making sure that it was adequate. We had to add some Wi-Fi boxes to some of those off-campus spaces, and so I mean that was a cost we incurred, but it was very necessary. Students have to have access, and so we were totally okay with that. I appreciate Tim for helping us get those boxes in from that quantity, high quantity. And so that's the report in terms of particularly that survey that was done and how we would make sure we would be responsive to those issues that came up and how we would execute it. And again, to the staff, thank you all for a job well done. We've been intentional about our communications with the students. We did a lot more of that all over the summer, even in terms of them moving in. We've been intentional in our training with our staff, our customer service expectations. Our move-in went really well. We had a really smooth move-in. We were able to, accommodate those students that filled out a housing application. We got all of them placed and assigned. We even assigned and placed students who just showed up on the first day of school, first few days of school. We were in the gym. We placed quite a few students during that time period. And so that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Chief, anything?
No, just want to piggyback on what Dean Stevens said. The new things that were put in place have been very, very helpful and successful. Even in the meeting with Metro yesterday, the only call for service they've had is what he talked about with the guy with the gym shoes, or what we call tennis shoes in the back seat. Now they've done hundreds upon hundreds of extra patrols, which has been a very positive benefit. And to answer one of the concerns the students had, we have extra personnel on second and third shift from the 24-hour security from the front and the back. And then us making our checks and Metro making those checks have been hugely positive for what we talked about, and that referencing from this year to last year. Again, the conversation with Deputy Chief Green about them doing even a better job of policing the area even more. We haven't had, usually we get calls saying there was a trans being on property. If it's happening, they hadn't even called and made us aware of that. So from a statistical standpoint, those have been minimal or haven't even occurred to our understanding.
All right. So we talked at our last meeting about this, about leaving positive footprints everywhere we go. So that when we go to these places, we leave them in a better condition, better environment than they were when we first came. I'm hearing that it's a better environment, right? And I'm hoping that since we're going to be using hotels for a while or something to solve our housing issue until we get something built, that we are creating goodwill in the community. Perhaps ideally to the point where hotels are saying, we want you to come here because when you come here, our area gets better. Right? And I think that needs to be an intentional focus. And once again, I encouraged us at the last meeting to have conversations with urban planning and social work and our on-campus experts to begin to bring community services and improvements to the areas where we're going. And so I want to restate that. I think that is a moral responsibility for us when we go into neighborhoods that we improve the community.
I mean, that's a good thing, but that's not our sole objective.
Correct. It's a secondary element.
Make
but-
sure the students are
Correct.
serviced and at the point where they can experience student success. If we happen to improve the community by being there, it's a good thing.
Correct, right.
That's not an overriding objective.
It's not number one, but it's not number 682. So.
Dr. Glover, did you have anything else? Or you were gonna say something before?
We'll probably come back.
Any questions? Dr. McKevin, Dr. Whibley, Dr. Cole, anything?
No questions for me.
All right. Okay, let's move to our next agenda item is report on the proposed housing development along Cumberland property, please.
So, just backing up, if you recall, this was over a year ago. We have presented an agreement that we're doing with Music City Baseball folks to assess the property along the Cumberland River for prospective development. The development we're looking at would involve potential great facilities, including research, academic facilities. The reason we're coming in front of the committee here that we get started is housing facilities as well. And the first of its kind, a Major League Baseball stadium on the property, hotel conference center, another development. So one of the things that the board I know was interested in, as well as when we had some preliminary conversations with the SBC, was, well, what's the viability of the property to even develop? And so Music City Baseball team led by Ed Henley, who's here today, then embarked on a assessment process utilizing Barge company as well as some other companies to conduct an assessment as to really the viability of the property and options that would need to occur from a remediation standpoint, construction standpoint, to ensure that the property, get the property to a viability point. And so they did that, went through a process. They were out on the property, meeting with folks, examining, surveying the property, and conducting an analysis. From there, created some assessment, more technical engineering documents, and then we worked with them on sort of the creation of a layperson, more document that a layperson can understand. We're planning on having a bigger presentation at the November 16th board meeting, but from a housing standpoint, we wanted to sort of have an initial discussion and where Ed could field any questions regarding just the preliminary assessment that's been done and the options identification. Were about 4 alternatives or options that they're examining in terms of things that they could do to bring the property to a viability point, and identifying one as being perhaps the best from a cost effective and quality standpoint, and some projected costs associated with that. And so if you don't mind, perhaps give Ed an opportunity to provide some additional oversight information related to that.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you all for allowing my attendance. I think Lauren did a fantastic job of sharing the table. I think the key things to emphasize that were the objectives of the study. The assessment boundary totaled 196 acres. It is inclusive largely of the property that's known as the agricultural area and the farm. And the site is heavily impacted during a flood event. And so our most pressing and probably most common question that we got during that time was, is the site viable for development based on its impact during a flood event? We also had two other pretty significant impacts to consider. One of those being the utilities that are located throughout the property. Significant amount of effort went into doing title surveys, understanding the amount of utility work, as well as the easements and legal right to utility placement on the property. And then the third, which is somewhat of a catch-all, but I'll break it down a little bit further, is the environmental impacts. And so that relates to natural ecologies, stream beds, habitats, but also impacts from humans, right? And so we do have to the north of the property, the ExxonMobil site, which has been documented to have had some intrusions into ground surfaces. And so we documented all of those things. As Lauren said, pretty extensive summary there, about 700 pages of information related to all the things that I just mentioned. But ultimately, in summarizing, we work with Barge Design Solutions to first and foremost address flooding and the flood impact on the property. We had a total of 4 original alternatives or scenarios that we looked at, actually created a 5th alternative, which has become the recommended approach. The first out of the 4 alternatives, the first 3 were pretty much considered non-starters. Again, with the property being in the floodplain, any and all impacts must be vetted across the entire floodplain. And so we had to interact with FEMA and have conversations with them, look at the actual navigable channel and what impact that would be. And then, of course, our immediate neighbors in terms of if we're displacing water on this site, a pretty large retention area. Any movement to that, you have to kind of follow the bouncing ball of where that goes, or at least to a certain point in terms of the path of water. And so the 4th option that we found that actually seemed to start to get close to what we think would be acceptable for FEMA would essentially raise the site, majority of the site, not all, but a majority of the site, about 10 to 15 feet. It would elevate the site and not necessarily create a flat surface, but it would essentially support holding back water naturally holding back water in a flood event. What we found with taking that approach is that we're still just a bit short of the stormwater and flood event displacement that would be needed to allow for the entirety of the site to absorb development. And so we created a 5th alternative, which actually was proposing some trenching or dredging right along the shoreline. This is an absolutely appropriate and often used process and form of construction. And we were kind of given the blessing to take that assessment. What that does, and again, these are all these studies are being done through models. So everything is being done in a computer program. We're not actually building a physical model and testing, but a computer program is running these models. And so with that dredging and cutting back roughly 100 feet off of the current top of the river onto the property, we started to get to close to net zero impact, which is essentially your gold standard for making remediation efforts in a floodplain. We had a very good meeting, both with the Department of Water Services, our local governing water authority, as well as representatives from FEMA. And the feedback that we got is, yes, this model is something that we use as our standard, understanding some of those standards are changed, but also they're very deeply vetted. And so there may be some additional tweaks and adjustments as their feedback would come in. But we largely feel that by elevating the site, it unlocks the entirety of the site for development. There would still be some impacts related to environmental that need to be addressed or largely preserved in terms of habitats. Utilities are the other large impact area. The majority of the utilities kind of go at an angle along Ed Temple Boulevard and kind of go with the curvature. And so not necessarily not an issue, but a lot of outflow of stormwater actually runs through that area. could be worked with and developed around. But one pretty significant infrastructure challenge with utilities is a service line that actually supports the Exxon Mobil site that would ideally, and quite honestly, to do the type of skill development we're talking about, need to be relocated. So that was identified. We did do a survey. We actually did takeoffs. And so we kind of have a rough area of the actual placement of that line. And then the actual easement itself is present on title application. Last but not least, the environmental impacts. The really good thing is we feel that the documentation of everything to the site that borders along ExxonMobil has been documented well. You usually have two processes or a combination of the two processes to address that. That's usually you take out soil in areas that may have been or are documented as being impacted, or you put soil on top of them. We're proposing putting soil on top of it anyway, so kind of our natural remediation for the flood impact would support in solving any of those issues. And then in the wetlands, we would have a responsibility of documenting with wildlife professionals at the state level to make sure that any impacts that we would do would not impact an endangered species, because that's kind of a full stop. But if there are species that are just native or natural, you have the opportunity to relocate them, which is a process, and or to utilize the area as a feature of development. But you just have a standard of naturalization that would need to go there. That would become a much longer conversation, but had the conversation with at the state and national level to make sure that if we were to implement those standards that are in place, we did have enough area that could be done. We felt fairly confident about that. And the only other significant environmental impact related to wildlife is just bats on the bluff. And so, while that's not necessarily regulated in terms of what you would do to their habitat, it just controls when you would or would not be able to construct or do anything, especially if we're talking about something along the river's edge. All those factors being considered, I think there's a pretty high level of confidence that development in that area can be supported. Everything I just mentioned is not easy and does take time and will take resources. With all that being said, I think we had very capable professionals at the table to do this all across the Middle Tennessee area, Middle Tennessee Valley, and have conditions very similar. And so everything that was proposed, we feel fairly confident in the ability for it to be accomplished.
So that I understand the scope of the space. Are we talking about the tanks down towards campus where we currently have ag stuff going on? New buildings and that kind of stuff, or are we talking tanks up?
So I believe you're talking tanks down. So the borders would be Ed Temple Boulevard and the river.
Okay, so our
And then
current
tanks
ag
down.
space is no longer, that's right? Is that correct?
I mean, I would say that was the area delineated by the study.
Yeah, that's the area that they've assessed. Now, what they do on that property
Right.
and what we develop is be something led by Dr. Glover and the board.
Yeah,
and the state.
I'm trying to figure out what stays and what doesn't, what
Right.
goes, yeah.
We didn't see a need in a survey in just part of the property.
Right,
Yes.
right.
So in turn, what President directed us to do was to survey the entire property and then come back with the assessment, and then based on the assessment, we will talk about what part we will use for what.
Right.
And if the current agriculture piece is going to be restricted to a certain area, and what that area will be, or if we're going to use the site over here and the Glenville and the Cheatham County Farm. All those properties will be, in turn, it's up in there.
I would like to address that too. One of the things that the original assessment contemplated 60 acres and 100 acres. And quite honestly, the cost would be largely the same, especially when we talk about looking at as much of the title work that we did. And then the property itself has several different parcels. It's not as clean as just following those structures. So to try to delineate within that, it was quite honestly just a lot easier to say, put as big of an area of geographic area you could, study it all. And one of the initiatives, speaking from Union City baseball standpoint, is this was meant to be a collaborative effort that supported TSU regardless of the outcome. And so as much information that could be gathered as possible, and again, everything that's been done as a work product, it becomes property of TSU as well. So it was meant to.
So do we own from the tanks down along at Temple Boulevard, all the way to where the new housing development condos are
Almost that far, yeah.
Yes, just a
to
little,
the river.
except for just a little bit.
Trustee McKenzie,
We were walking,
go ahead,
I
sorry.
remember we were walking one day, showed my driving in a cart, and just shows it.
Okay, thank you.
We think we're boys to see.
Yes.
Trustee McKenzie, trustee Wembley, any questions from either of you?
No question. Sounds like we're where we need to be for viability. And the rest will go up to Dr. Glover and the board.
And something else I would just take on what he mentioned there is under the agreement that we have with them, you know, everything that they created, basically they share with us and that we can utilize for the board and Dr. Glover and assessing, going back to what Dr. Johnson was saying, what we want to do, and what we need to do from the development standpoint. So it's not just about Music City baseball. It's also about.
So if I remember, Dr. Glover was looking at something 6, 8, or 9 years ago, maybe that's too far back. But I know you were looking at something at that time. Yes, yeah,
Yeah, we were looking at.
Mixed use facility.
yes.
Yes, a mixed use facility, just having and it's still on the table, but just this just, what's on the table. We haven't ruled anything out yet.
Okay.
What we're doing now is going back, just reassessing where we were, because the deal we had then was it took so long to get through the process. It was some music,
Conference training center.
Yeah.
it was.
They're gonna do where they do the training for like road shows or for
They would get our students, our music and our students involved in band,
Mhm.
but it was just, it just took too long to get it going with all the proper issues to go through. So they had to put out and go somewhere else.
Okay.
So we're now just, since we have this master plan on the table, we're now just gonna go back and walk through, baseball is one of the things we really would like to do, but we have not brought it to the board. In fact, they're working on that, getting a presentation together for the board.
So you conducted basically a site evaluation, but has there any study been done as far as traffic, if this were to come about fully? What would access for the day-to-day folk that live across?
So two things occurred. One, we did a kind of a site interior study, right? So for concepts that were proposed and specifically to be able to hold a baseball facility. And then everything that's fuzzy, understanding what that would need to do and having a conversation about how could you have queuing that would basically be internal to the property. So, when you think about having, thousands of people come to a specific location, how is your impact on that location, determined? And so the only two kind of factors I looked at was queuing when people enter and queuing as people exit, making sure that there would still be able to have consistent flow of traffic. We did have a conversation with the city and had a much broader conversation. We had representatives from now NDOT, the National Department of Transportation. And what they spoke to us about was actually having, and they get to announce this publicly, but I don't think this is not public information, is they're looking at North Nashville in its entirety for a transit study. And of course, taking in what's happening along Parksville Pike, the state is doing from an infrastructure perspective. And so they're very aware of what we presented, and they are very aware of this corridor need for improvement along with its connection and then continuation through the Murfreesboro to Metro Center. And then going all the way, and they have another kind of tandem process that's going on for Murfreesboro Pike. And so those two corridors are kind of their two primary large corridors of study. But they didn't give us much more information than that, other than they kind of absorbed more information than us than they gave out. But we do know that they are looking at a focus on those two corridors.
Yeah, because there's been a lot of conversation about what the interstate has done to the area. One of the big things it did obviously was to abort the grid, right? So you can't pass through. 28th is a bottleneck right now, if you at certain times of day. So any additional traffic that the development would bring in is going to cause some pain, a lot of pain to the residents that live here. And so TSU is a community partner. And so anything that we recommend that we do has to take into consideration what the environmental impacts beyond just on the site.
One thing that came out of that conversation is, again, a leaning in from NDOT in the city that a comprehensive traffic study would be required.
Do you know if NDOT is considering a new bridge on this side of town?
They've not
Over-
mentioned,
over the river.
they did not mention that, especially when we had our discussion. I know there's been conversations about project now termed as Riverside, but the Ewing site is on the other side of the river across from Metro Center. But that was not something that they.
This is why we don't want, we want to piecemeal this, we'll just show the master plan. Because we know, we have conversations about a hotel, conference center, and right, either on the opposite side of the street, across from where the farm is now, or somewhere on the other than that farm, we're just looking at, we're still walking it off now. We're not ready to finalize or even formalize a presentation on that part of it yet. That's all part of what we perceive to be our master plan.
And one final question, the Exxon area is not a brownfield, it's not designated as a brownfield, or not yet.
It is correct, at least not yet. Based on what we found, the documentation in terms of the few instances that have occurred there, it is not considered a brownfield. Now, if you were to develop it, you would be removing the tanks, so you may have a pretty significant level of redevelopment requirements, but it is not classified as a brownfield at the time.
Because we didn't call it egg an egg, we called it a chicken. It doesn't mean that the egg not an egg. So I mean.
Again, when you take, once you go to develop, you absorb certain responsibilities.
But since we're layering on.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
This property, again, not being that property, has none of those classifications.
All right. Any other questions? Before we move on? All right, let's move on.
Yes, one last question, and that is, where is this, and has the property been entitled? Has the entitlement process been completed on this parcel of land?
No, so I'll speak just specifically for our efforts. No entitlement activities were done. We did have a conversation with the city, and Metro Planning was present at that meeting. And in order to move forward with largely any concept, it would need to have an entitlement process begin and be satisfactorily completed.
All right. Next up, a report on the Avon Williams campus development.
So our approach to the Avon Williams campus, as we understand it, is to look at highest and best use of that land. And what is presently provided in the master plan recommendation is for that to be sort of split into three pieces. One where the building is an adjacent amount of parking to accommodate the building. The separate portion of the parking lot, which is closest to YMCA, we identified as a possible P3 opportunity. And then the incubation site to be identified as possible P3 opportunity. With the value of real estate in the downtown corridor, we think the benefit to the institution is leveraging that site for its partnership opportunities versus redevelopment of parking or rebuilding the incubation center on that site or something to that effect. The existing structure, Avon Williams campus, has completed the facilities condition assessment on that. And we have what is north of $30 million scope for that building to be adequately improved. So we see that interest as being key, but leaving the other pieces as opportunities for P3 partners. Any questions?
And I know, no question, but I know trustee McKenzie has shared with us his position and the numbers that he wants us to start talking about with the P3 potentials. And we have not formalized anything per se with any group, but we have several groups that have come to the table to have conversation and submit concepts.
I'll punt to trustee McKenzie on that one. Trustee
Yes,
McKenzie.
we're aware that the P3 in particular will need to be RFP. I would suggest that we take a look at some of the offers that we have on the table to make sure that the metrics in the RFP for other developers who may want to bid on a P3 come up to the standards of what we've already been offered. which is considerable. On a 99-year land lease, we've been offered $4 million a year on a 99-year land lease, a $10 million bonus when the shovels go in the ground, and then considerable scholarship money for the remainder of the land lease. The present value on that, as you more can imagine, is quite substantial. And we want to make sure that when we submit RFPs and allow people to bid, that we get the highest and best use, and more specifically, the best financial advantage to the university in our effort to best serve our constituency. One other project that, other than the Avon project that we have on the table, is something that Trustee Pinnick and I have been working on the Church of God property. We signed an affiliation agreement with a developer at the Church of God. There are some issues as to whether or not the veracity of the affiliation agreement is substantial enough for the investment bank to be able to issue a municipal bond to finance the project using a tax-free construct. We, that being Deacon Pinnick and I, are in the middle of conversations with the developer and with the investment bank to move this along to its next steps. The beauty of that particular situation is it does not require approval from the state to move it along to a material number of beds for our students in the future.
There is a question.
Sure.
Can you share, is that a lease or is that anticipated to become a lease? What was the end product of that
Well,
agreement?
it is, I can't speak, the attorney can speak to you from a legal point of view, but it is essentially a residence hall, a dormitory that would be made available, apartment that would be made available to our students.
Preferred client,
Preferred, yeah.
Rather
Yeah.
preferred,
provider.
provide, this is a good healthcare analogy, but yes, so they build it. We're gonna make sure our teams are aware that we're sort of collaborating with them. I remember there's a private residence hall on the University of Kansas campus or off campus for students to utilize. So we're not obligated. We have no monetary obligation to the entity to do anything. We're saying we're gonna work with you to get students who are interested over there. You're gonna charge them directly. And they're gonna pay you directly unless they agree to do something different for that house.
But they did say that they would allow student affairs to do programming and different things over there for the student.
If I may add, one thing to consider is that those students that may opt to stay there, that's taking revenue away from the university perhaps.
Correct.
Okay, so we just need to work through all those things as well.
Well, the idea is certainly in terms of proximity to have our students over here versus in the hotels. So,
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Would they be similar housing costs? The rent,
The answer to that depends upon the cost of the development, which is precisely why municipal financing is cost effective, in that it's the lowest cost of capital that's available for development. The delicate side, a part of this arrangement is that the affiliation agreement with the university, though not legally binding us to a financial obligation in terms of number of students and what they will likely pay, an investment bank has got to be able to determine that the likelihood of the number of students we put there and the likelihood of their being able to pay a certain amount will support a financing.
Right.
So essentially what we did when we brought the deal to the table was I started with the Vice President of Finance, Dr. Allen. to determine how much we are paying now per bed per semester, and then back into that cost using an assumed cost of capital and a municipal financing to make sure that the cost of the bed that would have to be charged by the developer does not exceed the amount that our students would be able to pay using a metric which is driven by our current cost per bed per semester, which, as I recall, without my iPad being open, I think was $4,700 or thereabout per bed per semester. And correct me if I'm incorrect, Dr. Brown.
No, that is spot on, Dr. McKenzie.
I had the opportunity last week to go up to MTSU and look at housing that was developed adjacent to the campus by the private developers for their students. And I'm telling you, that model works well at MTSU. It is, they've got hundreds of beds that are adjacent to the campus. This particular facility, as I was standing on the property, I'm looking at the football field, right? So that's how close it was. And so I would even be interested at some point of some guarantees with this, you know, if they build it and it's close to our campus, but Meharry puts all their students there, you know, I'd like a better deal where we got first deal on the first 100 beds for 10 years.
Well, that, we have the priority, so under that, we get to basically say, these are the amount of students that we want over there. If we're not stepping up, then they, as a backup, can go with Meharry or Fisk for those students there. So it's up to us, really, in terms of, we get the first shot and saying, our students, you know, these are the number of students that will be over there. But going back to Trustee McKenzie's point, they need to make this work from a student model too. So if we are not providing the number of students that they need, then they can go elsewhere, but that's limited. So it's not come one, come all. We're not having Joe Blow off the street either. It is Meharry and his Fisk students.
One thing that I would add is that there's several parcels in the location, but the parcel that they're going to build on is already zoned, so they can build by right now, and it does not require any additional effort from council or planning to do that. So,
Is there a proposed bed count? Are these 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms? I'm thinking as we move down R1 with, you know, research faculty and they come with their families and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that there's a variety of potential options with respect to that. But one of the things that we're going back to the Cumberland that we're talking about with respect to the potential housing down there would be more family housing, or even, as Dr. Johnson has mentioned before, about the need for grad students.
Yeah, grad student, married family, you know, research faculty kind of things who come.
But we can, I mean, if that kind of facility, you know, we have the ability in working with them in collaboration, we're gonna be kind of be a partner of saying, all right, we want to house these kind of students and maybe even on these floors. And things like that.
And also speaking to the need, I mean, for the last 20 years, in some capacity, we have rented space from the House of God. And the last probably 11, we have rented every fall from the House of God. So, and that, we don't think that's going to change probably at least over the next 5 to 10 years. I can't see that changing. I can see us still needing some of that space. So
It would be good if they said that once they construct the new property, they would move our students out of the old property and renovate the old property,
And then
update the old property.
so I'm just speaking to the need, that there's a significant need.
with our aspirational goal of 20,000 students, then we're gonna need everything we can get. Yes.
we said 10.
Did we?
We challenged on 10, so we're just kind of doing.
It's all right. They've challenged.
Gotta dream big.
They've challenged worse than I
Dream
did. So we sort of moved into the committee reports. Trustee McKenzie, did you have anything else that you wanted to bring to us?
No, I don't have anything else. I did send a recent communication with the offer on Avon that I would hope would be the gold standard for the RP in case unless we get something richer than that. But I would like to make sure that that's shared with everyone. I sent it to you and to Lawrence Pendleton. And several of you have it, but I want to make sure everyone can see it. So when we do get through the master plan in February, that everybody understands that we want to make the best financial advantage for the university by making sure the metrics in the RFP will meet a certain gold standard.
There was another apartment complex that we were talking about earlier on about possibly acquiring too. What's happening?
Oh, that's.
Trustee Johnson.
No, not just the facts, it's the other.
No. You talking about?
Oh,
Zilla.
Fort Villa.
Port Villa. What's happened with that?
I think we,
I forgot, we have to go down because someone, Dr. Which moved Dr. Andre Johnson to get the update on that one. Because he's got
Direct access to the owner of that property, so he wanted to take the lead and guided us.
So on record.
I don't have anything else in terms of housing committee reports, but I did want to ask Dr. Glover if she had anything to say to us with respect to the money and how it might impact our what might come for us in terms of housing.
Not streaming.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
I can say that, Harold Love, Representative Love and I met with the governor and two others from his office. It was a very good meeting and we started the conversations. And we haven't submitted any numbers to him as far as a request is concerned. But we'll just had a meeting and we're.
Can't hear very well.
We had a meeting with the governor's office, with the governor and two of his staff, two persons. The deputy governor. And another one, the person's office. Healy, yes. And so we just started the conversations and we had a good meeting. And it was a week right before homecoming. So it was, I said, after homecoming, we were probably, we didn't set a date to get together again. But I can say that we are, the conversations were good conversations. So I'm looking forward to the next round.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee or anyone else?
We move forward with requests for 2 new dorms to SBC, is that correct?
We have to get on, we have to get on the agenda. We're still trying to get on the SBC agenda. We made some requests, so I'm not sure what you may know.
Yeah, I can provide an update to that. We have completed that phase of the housing business plan, not necessarily master plan. It has not been presented to the SBC yet. One of the adjustments that we want to make is determining the sequence. We don't foresee them being built simultaneously, but being one after the other and building that timeline. And then the cost analysis on it is the present action. That's done in concert with the financial consultant Reed Jones, which is a third party that validates our assumptions and the outcomes, and then a separate consultant who presents the cost of construction. And both of those have to be fixed before we can present it to the State Building Commission. Moody Nolan is in the lead on that and has it prepared, but it's not finalized yet.
So the rationale for doing one and then the other is economic, or is it space, or what's the reason?
Well, it's the cost of construction as well as sequencing and disrupting that much campus at once. Also, the way that we intend to take down, after those are done, should be in lockstep with that as well.
My understanding though is that the location for these is not currently occupied by a building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm a little confused as why we can't build them both at the same time.
Well, there will be, the two new residence halls.
Yeah.
They'll be similar to the structure we have now, the last one.
Construction at the same time.
And build them at the same time, since there is no takedown.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
What I'm saying is similar to the ag buildings, one will start and then the other will start and follow behind it. They both won't be done at one time. In the sense that you don't have one contractor building two buildings at once.
But you're not saying though, you're saying like one gets started and maybe 6 months later, the other one. You're not saying one's gonna get started after the completion of the first one.
No, I'm saying they would come one behind the other, just like.
Staggered.
Yes,
They're coming up together, but they're not equal.
they're not the same project. That's
There's
what.
not a year delay between starts.
Part of that too allows
That's
for
not
that,
projection.
for one of those to come online faster. Okay, if that makes sense. So when you stagger it like that, that allows that opportunity for us to get students in the new residence hall faster. It's easy to do 500 beds, 2 or 3 months later, start the next one, or 6 months, however that process goes.
I just
That
don't want,
ensures
I
us
just don't want it
time.
to be 18 months.
Well,
In between, no.
listen,
It's-
that's not how we're
Yeah,
planning
no.
this.
But it is, the 700-bed facility took 4 years to build. And it was a reason why. And so we're using the leverage of what we learned in that process, in this process.
And to Dr. McKenzie's point, he has stressed about his Dillons and P3s along with Will Rafford as well. Going that route will actually help us shorten that construction window. Okay, that could be about what, 12 months, maybe 18 months overall. So it's more advantageous for us to do that for many reasons, and financially being one of them.
All right. Seeing nothing else, I move that we adjourn. Secretary Paul?
Trustee Pettit,
Yes,
trustee McKenzie.
Yes.
motion carries. We are officially adjourned at whatever time it is. Thank you. Andy Stevens. I know. This is the first year with all that stuff. Man, so you have to take a group that. Next time. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Yeah, I was planning on that. I was looking for the right word.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. How much?
Oh, man, thank you, sir. Congratulations, Mr. Proctor. Congratulations, Mr. Proctor.
Give me something like this.
Thank you. Yes.
I mean, he kept saying,
Yeah.